Yo, what's going on, everybody? AA Ryan here, and welcome back to Westworldia, the Westworld Breakdown Review Show. Tonight, we're reviewing Westworld Season 3, Episode 4, titled The Mother of Exiles. Now, if you guys didn't know, the Mother of Exiles is actually another name for the Statue of Liberty, derived from a poem by the poet Emma Lazarus, the poem titled The New Colossus, which is, of course, talking about the Statue of Liberty. And interesting to what this episode entails, because you could either give that to Dolores or you could give that to Maeve, right? I'm thinking more Dolores because, well, let me just go ahead and say it right now. Spoilers. All the pearls that she brought back, well, she just copied herself on them. That's right. Not only is Charlotte Hale Dolores, Connell's is Dolores. Later we see a body copy of Musashi, from Shogun World, has a Dolores head in it. That leaves one more unknown host walking around with Dolores' head in it. And then we have, of course, Bernard. That's all 5 pearls. Pretty wacky, pretty crazy, man. And, the truth doesn't always set you free, all right? And it was laid out for us tonight. And the opening scene, just by itself, really set the tone for this episode, man. Starting off with William, the man in black. We haven't seen him in a while. So to get him back in the picture was pretty awesome. And, from the previews, you figured maybe this is already going on in some simulation or, that far, far future where we saw on that last hanging scene in Season 2 with him and Emily. Well, host Emily, I should say. Well, he still sees Emily, even in this present day, because that's what it is, version of William, as he's in his shattered house, and how he's essentially going crazy, and not only seeing Emily, but hearing Dolores, and reliving events like his wife's suicide, even to the point where Emily's in there, and he doesn't know what's real, and she's pretty much just like, here, take your life and really see if it's real or not. And super intense, but as it all kind of just shatters into pieces as we hear Hale's voice enter the room, and we realize that it's in the real world, and he literally is just going crazy because not only did he kill his daughter, his real daughter, as I'm pretty sure is what they're hitting home here, is that was his real daughter in the park, and he killed her, and he made the choice. And Hale's there to pick him back on his feet, shake the dirt off, and take him to that board meeting, emergency board meeting for the members of Delos, so they can get that majority vote and of shares and hold power of the company still from Insight, aka Serac. But it's pretty crazy, man, that he's pretty much lost it at this point. And throughout this episode, we really see how him truly losing it is all connected to Dolores's master plan. Though we still don't know the insights, see what I did there, of what she has, planned out for him. We know her visiting an old friend was all part of her plan. So we'll see how she's going to use William in the end here. So we do jump around a lot in this episode, and not in a bad way at all. It really keeps it fast-paced and moving from character to character, from Bernard to Charlotte to Maeve to Dolores and Caleb. But here in this instance, we jump over to what it seems to be Arnold showing Dolores that house for the first time, in Singapore, that is. Because we see later in the episode, Serac knows where that place is at. But seemingly we think it's like a flashback with Arnold, but it turns out it's just another fidelity test for Bernard Delgado and Armand Delgado. And essentially it's just Dolores kind of letting Bernard know, again, you live as long as the last person who remembers you, right? And then it's kind of a first clue on who is inside the other pearls, because he essentially asks, like, who else did you bring? And Dolores essentially says, well, we live how we want, and we be who we want. And it's kind of all based on this choice, right? I feel like choice is a big part of this episode, which is a big theme in the show in general. This episode kind of hits that back in the playing field, that Dolores is making this choice, and her choice, well, is to do it her way, because as she says later in the episode, if you want to have done it right, you do it yourself, which is interesting because that's totally like an old school, just like hardworking, human phrase. So she is the next species, though, right? We then cut to real Bernard as he's with Stubbs, and they're in Victorville, USA. There's a divergence over there. It's cool because it's like by some launch pad area, and we see these shuttles flying off and landing, themselves, like self-landing shuttles, like seamlessly back and forth. Like, oh, okay, it's that far in the future. Of course, we'd have that technology, right? But we get some of the cool dudes, duo there of Stubbs and Bernard, as they're just chilling in this crappy hotel, kind of figuring out their next plan. And Bernard essentially is making a remote, a wireless remote that he doesn't have to use any commands for. He can just shut down a host with, right? Because he presumes that Dolores is essentially, as he puts it, kill and replace. So Stubbs is onto him as well, like, oh, okay, so she's essentially nabbing somebody that she needs important, killing them, and replacing them with the host, with one of the pearls she brought back. And so Bernard assumes that she in fact is doing that with Liam Dempsey Jr. So obviously, as the audience, we know that it's Connells that he has under that she has under her control, aka it's Dolores Connells, but they don't know that yet. Either way, they think it's Liam, so that's who they're after. But we get some funny banter between those two, so it's gonna, Stubbs is pretty much like the comic relief of this season, right? We then get Caleb and Dolores as they're choosing slick threads for this party that Dolores plans on intercepting Liam at, right? She's in cahoots with Connells at that point, and they're trying to get Caleb some new threads to fit in. He's already like, well, this is totally not my social class or where I'm supposed to be at. And she's like, well, you gotta fit in. They use plumage to impress, and it shows their idiocracy, essentially. So not only do they have to look the part, but they have to literally be the part, and not just even act it. And to make sure they have entrance into the party, and not only that, to have access to Liam's funds, that way they can really get his attention, right? They essentially hijack a man who I guess is like an accountant for Dempsey. Dolores knocks his ass out, takes his blood, injects that blood into Caleb. That way, essentially, the identification via thumbprint on these technology scans will show that it's, in fact, Mr. Titus, or I think that was the guy's name, Titterman or something like that, and give access to relinquish all of Dempsey's funds to Dolores and Caleb, essentially as leverage later when they go to intercept him at this club. They also end up getting, his, using the Connell bot, they end up getting what they need from Dempsey to further make that happen. So it's pretty crazy, man. But then we get some nice Sirach and Maeve moments as Sirach essentially lets Maeve know what's going on as she's in a restaurant in Singapore getting a drink. We learn a little bit about Sirach's past, and also about this world. In the year 2058, Paris is no more. There was a thermonuclear disaster. I think in that divergence, back in one of the previews, it said that back in like the year 2025, in their timeline, of course, there was a thermonuclear disaster in France. Apparently, this devastated the country. So no more is Paris, and Serac would have loved to take Maeve there since she's mentioned it, but of course that is the fate. And of course she's already kind of taken back. You have some connection there with Serac, and then as they dig deeper into why he really wants Dolores, at least through her eyes, why she's trying to figure it out. We already know he wants that key because he wants that information to finish the project with Rehoboam, to have all of the information that Delos collected, because in fact it's even a more precise mapping of the human brain than any of the algorithms Rehoboam can predict and create. And he needs that because he thinks that's that final puzzle to elevate Rehoboam insight to that godly realm, even though it's seemingly already there. Though you could say the same thing about Ford and his creations and where that went. That's creating God, copying your mind and consciousness over to be transferred into new bodies, like just getting a new car or something. It's crazy, and it's totally playing God. Hence another big theme of this show, right? But what really sinks it for Maeve, Serac essentially says, because Maeve's kind of like, well, what's stopping me from not killing Dolores and bringing her back to you? He's like, well, I know what you want. You want to be with your daughter in that world. And she's like, well, the world's closed off. And that's when he we already knew, but he tells Maeve, well, she's holding the only key to it. So you get her, you get the key, you can see your daughter. So again, her daughter still is that big cornerstone for Maeve, to the point where, sometimes I wish there was more motive behind it, and it kind of makes her reasons less justified. Obviously, it's making her more human to want to go to her daughter no matter what, and that's her drive. But it seems that's where I'm getting at, though, right? It almost seems like the drive is there, but I guess it all goes back down to season 1, that she chose to go look for her daughter, right? It's back to that choice. She chose to look for her daughter back in season 1 and got off that train when she was about to leave, and that's what started it. So fair enough, right? Look, I'm like talking to myself about this stuff. I'm over here Bernarding it. But they eventually get to the Arnold house in Singapore. Like I said, it was in Singapore. And he's there to essentially show Maeve, like, look, the divergent's tracked into this house. They walk in, Maeve sees the, host building machine, the dipping machine. And, that's when Serac like, look, she made more than just one. She didn't just make her new body. She made 5 others' bodies. And of course there it didn't reveal who they were, but it showed things on the screen. And essentially this is when they kind of start getting a start on tracking her down, because Serac's already got one link to the chain, and it's this Singapore gentleman that I guess was somehow Dolores coaxed into helping him get access to bodies and identities through the mortician. And this lady's code name in the underground is the Mortician. So essentially they get information from this guy to go see the Mortician so Maeve can continue on the hunt, right? And that's what we get. We get Maeve on the hunt there, because as Serac says, they have a head start. And so she essentially heads out, and we get to see some cool things from her. Essentially EMP ESP, all right? That's what I'm coining here. EMP ESP. Because not only can, she can control all the, electronics, especially the hosts within Westworld, but she's out in the main world now, and she can control pretty much all electronics. When she walks, she's sending out like an EMP and disturbing everything around her, and she can hack into things instantly. Now, Dolores can do the same thing, which is pretty awesome. So that's where I'm kind of like, okay, so Dolores couldn't do that in Westworld. So how is she able to have such cool hacking skills now, where, maybe hers is kind of a different lane, where Maeve's is straight up EMP, ESP, all right? Pretty crazy, man. So back to William. Charlotte essentially convinces him, to come to the shareholders meeting. He's kind of pepping him up, even helps shaving his face, trying to get him ready to face the real world because it's time for him to go back to reality, right? And they kind of go over the plan of how they're going to talk it out, and how essentially, with his help, not only being there to give his vote, because he says, well, it's not going to all go over with just my vote. And she's like, well, that's when having you there will kind of boost the support of the others in the group. So they kind of go over that plan, and as we're moving on throughout the episode and we're coming back to him, we then see him continue to struggle with the demons, especially Emily, within his head. And, well, of course, as he is finally ready to go to the meeting, that's when, of course, Charlotte reveals its identity as Dolores, aka Dolores in Hale, yet again, just another version, a copy, if you will. And, well, that scene kind of all connects as the big reveal happens throughout. We'll tie it back in. But this is when, the reality that Charlotte Hale presents to the Man in Black still is not what it seems, right? This whole show is like that. What you think is real, even if they're saying it's real, like this is the real world, we're in the real world now, right? It's all up for grabbing, man. There could be anything, right? So now that Dolores and Caleb have access to Liam's funds, they use the thumbprint signature via the blood, injection and everything, and they got in. They enter the mask party, another crazy futuristic naked art party. It's almost like a super high class, like model auction, right? All these super high fashion, beautiful people, pretty much all naked, wearing nothing but bow tie collars and vests with high heels and maybe a top hat, are all on stage as these masqueraded rich folk stroll around and essentially auction them. And as Dolores puts it, when they enter the party with she enters it with Caleb's still not knowing that she's an android, says your world is not much different than mine. He's got to be looking at her like, what the hell? I wonder if he'll just be like, I know you're one of them eventually. But who knows? Maybe he'll figure it out, maybe he won't. But pretty cool. We get a classic Westworld trope here with present day music being turned into something else to fit the scene. Usually back in the first season it was classic rock songs and stuff being turned into Western songs, some even natural or new songs, or Wu-Tang Clan being turned into a old Japanese samurai era tune, to Wicked Games by The Weeknd being played on violins and strings. It's pretty crazy, man. And I love it. I love how they do that. But all in all, the setting here is wild, right? And this is when the episode gets extra wild, because things all start converging, right? Not only is Liam heading there, right, to meet his friends, the simulation dude who's smoking from the first episode, and his wife, meeting them there, and he's there to kind of blow some steam off. Dolores and Caleb show up, as well as Bernard and Stubbs. They're all there. The whole party's there, and they're all trying to intercept Liam, right? Bernard, of course, thinking Liam's a host. Dolores trying to get her plan in the action and really get what she needs out of Liam, especially since she has Connellbot. But it's pretty interesting. I mean, we get introduced not only to the rich, crazy sex party stuff, but we get introduced to this drug called Genre, which is a digital psychopharma hybrid. which essentially makes you trip balls, I guess, via your drip, that little device in the roof of the mouth that connects to all the senses via insight. But yeah, man, when I'm saying these people are nude, I mean they're full nude here. I mean, coochie and all, right? But Dempsey eventually figures out that he has no funds left because he's trying to enter one of these auctions, and that's when we finally get to see Stubbs show up, Stubbs and Bernard show up and realize that the button's not working as they intercept Dempsey, but Connells has got his eye on him too because he's looking out while Dolores is in contact with him, and Dolores and Caleb are trying to get Liam. And then as Bernard and Stubbs are walking away with Dempsey, Dolores comes around the corner, guns blazing, just shooting pistols out in the party, man, just taking fire, boom, 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 boom. And essentially, Bernard and Dempsey get away while Dolores sicks Caleb on them. And, well, we get a nice little Dolores versus Stubbs action, which was actually really cool. We get some sweet robo action. Like, these robots fighting is pretty badass because they're real strong, right? They're not like they don't have any resistance like us humans. They can just go full force, and they kind of know martial arts for the most part because they're really kicking ass, man. And in fact, Liam's buddies, the simulation guy and his wife, they end up, as they're tripping balls, notice Lara and are like, what the hell? Even when, after the fight with Stubbs, because Dolores throws Stubbs off the freaking balcony, Dolores walks by the simulation guy and was like, I loved it, dude. It was great. Again, kind of like the writers being like, what's real, man? What's real in this show? It is Westworld, right? But yeah, she fucks Stubbs up, put it that way. But before we get too crazy with that scene, though, we're cutting back to Meg for a little bit because she's on her own journey. As she goes to the mortician, right, as she essentially breaks in, she is able to learn from the mortician that Dolores came to search, and the mortician sent them to the Yakuza, right, which is awesome. So, of course, she heads there. And first thing I'm already thinking, like, okay, well, Maeve dealt with Shogun World, so she has some sense of Japanese culture. She can pretty much speak all languages off the dot, so she'll be ready for this. And she's on the search there, and as she actually gets to the Yakuza warehouse, she's able to just hack in. She enters, of course, gentleman greeter of the Yakuza clan, and she can hack into their guns because this is how much people are reliant on technology. Not only do the medics in an ambulance have to rely on technology before they can diagnose and work on a patient, they also can't even shoot a gun without robot help, right? So you wonder if pretty much you don't never need tactical training. You just let the gun do your thing. Hence why the little armbands are on the guns, right? Now the guys in Westworld, the guards in those in the park seem like they know what they're doing, but who knows, right? Regardless, Maeve's able to take over, shoot, have them all kill themselves. And as she's entering the deeper into the warehouse, she notices that with gunshots hitting all the tanks of this factory, that this white stuff oozing out is in fact the gel, the gum, the ooze used to make new hosts. So it's like one of the factories that Westworld buys from, or sources its materials from. And somebody is, of course, running that in the shadows, as we see. And who else is it but Musashi? Yeah, that's right. She was looking for this gentleman named Sato, the head of this particular Yakuza ring. And, well, it's actually Musashi, the samurai from Shogun World back in season 2. But is it Musashi? No, it's Dolores' pearl inside a Musashi copy body. God, this show's freaking confusing. I just gotta make a new rap about this or something, right? So this is where we get the big reveal of the multi-Dolores thing, right? Not only does Maeve start to figure out Musashi is Dolores, as Caleb stops Bernard, Connells rolls in, kills all his own men, tells Liam to run, tells Caleb to follow. Bernard starts to ask, like, well, who is it, right? And this is when it all starts breaking down. Not only does he say, I know you more than anybody or better than anyone. I told you, I needed you for balance, essentially. We get Charlotte revealing to the Man in Black, you're my oldest friend. I knew you'd come too. Because now she's been also listening to him talk to his ghosts, the ghosts in his past. And she's been spying on him. But it's okay because she's an old friend. And so, that drives that into the core. Then we learned that, like I said, Musashi's like one as well. Again, we still leave that one out. We don't know who is the last Dolores. But it all kind of comes to a point that, she wanted it done her way. And she figured, well, I'll get the world ready for us. And then all of us, we can be separate. We can have our own identities, make more of us. And this is when Maeve, of course, is ready to stop her. And we get a Musashi Maeve fight. Actually, it's Maeve versus Dolores, the first Maeve versus Dolores of the season, technically. And Musashi wins with the sword. Maeve really did try, but ultimately Dolores got the upper hand, and Maeve was left in a pool of host fluid. Kind of reminiscent of the blood in the milk thing from the first season too, if you guys remember that. Really cool. Almost as kind of symbolize like she's starting over again. Like she just can't get a foot in, man. And Dolores has really got a head start. She really does. So it's not looking too good for Maeve's cause, and Sirach's, that is. But as Charlotte essentially reveals herself to the Man in Black as another version of Dolores, and essentially reveals the plan to all of us that she wasn't really going to take him to the shareholders meeting. She was going to send him to a mental institute because that was Emily's last wish. Though, is it really? Or is it just another thing Dolores has control over? Another way for Dolores to analyze the Man in Black. But before she goes in, before William goes in and, it's taken away, Charlotte rubs her hand across his face, and you see a little needle come out of her fingertip and prick him. So she must have implanted something, right? Which I'm sure will, lead to more issues with his illusions and delusions. We then get William, as the last scene rolls out, in the mental institute. It's pretty nice, but he does begin to have visions of Dolores. Dolores back in her Westworld garb, the rancher's daughter's dress, and she essentially is letting William know that, this is the end of the game, right? I know your one question, are you real? As he says, am I me? She's like, well, here's the end of the game. It's time for you to figure it out. And that's where we're left with him. Again, it's not only a question of, is he real? Is it a question of, is any of this real? Are these just mere predictions from Sirach? Because Sirach can make you see the future. He can predict different outcomes based on different possibilities and different scenarios. And can show your past ghosts and demons, right? This show always presses the limits of consciousness, and with this episode, it pushed it beyond my expectations. It really did. There's a lot of theories out there about who was in Hale, so much so that it started taking attention away from who were the other Pearls. Turns out they're all Dolores. Well, the last one, we don't know who they are. Might not be. But regardless, it's very, very interesting and continues to make you think on the levels of, is any of this real? And then it goes to your real life and you want to ask the same damn thing, right? I loved it. It was superb. I loved the fast back and forth. I loved that we got William again, though his journey's looking like it's taking a real dark one. And now that Dolores really has him in her web, it's going to be interesting to see how he plays a role in her upheaval, right? Whether it's going to be to help or to hinder her progress. Bernard, due to his, nature, will probably end up helping her more than hindering her, because ultimately, though he thinks he's a hindrance, he's there to be the balance, right? And then of course we have the Sirac Maeve duo, and they're not really getting much traction either. Dolores is more than just a few steps ahead. She's leaps and bounds, because she's not having to really deal with too much difference. It's just herself spread all over the place, kind of like a virus. Next week's gonna be real crazy. Real wild. It looks like it ramps up another 10 degrees, and it was already at a freaking 11 tonight, right? Not only do we get more about Sirac's reasonings, maybe deeper under the surface of him just wanting that code, what's really driving him. And it looks like we really get Dolores' plan in the action. And I mean action, from cars blowing up to, bikes on fire, to a lot of hell being raised. And I'm going to be there for it, baby. I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's breakdown of Westworld Season 3, Episode 4, titled The Mother of Exiles. I sure did, and I'm looking forward to next week. I'm looking forward to the rest of the season. It's Episode 4 down. We're on the back half when we come back. 5, 6, 7, and 8 left. Whew. Let's do it, guys. Till next time, stay safe out there. Stay home out there. And we'll see you then. Peace.